My phone slipped from my shaking fingers and clattered onto the kitchen floor. Through blurred vision, I could still see those venomous words glowing on the cracked screen. Mom had a stroke. The doctors say it's bad. This is your fault. You killed her. My sister's message felt like a knife twisting in an old wound, one I thought had finally started to heal. 3 months. That's how long it had been since I'd stopped sending money. 3 months since I'd chosen myself for the first time in my life. And now apparently that choice had nearly killed my own mother. I collapsed against the wall, my chest tightening as panic and guilt threatened to swallow me whole. Was she right? Had my selfishness really caused this? The familiar darkness I'd fought so hard to escape began creeping back and whispering that I was the villain in this story. But this time something was different. Before I tell you what happened next, before I reveal the truth that changed everything I need to know, have you ever been made to feel like the villain for simply trying to survive? Have you ever been guilt-tripped for setting boundaries with people who were supposed to love you? If you're nodding right now, if your heart is racing because this feels too familiar, then you need to hear this story. Hit that like button, subscribe for more stories about breaking free from toxic manipulation, and drop a comment telling me what's the hardest boundary you've ever had to set. Because what I discovered that night didn't just save me, it might save you too. Now, let me take you back to where it all began, back to when I still believed that being a good daughter meant sacrificing everything, including myself. I grew up in a small town outside Columbus, Ohio, in a modest ranch-style house that always seemed to need repairs we could not afford. My parents divorced when I was 8 years old, and the split was ugly. My father moved to Arizona with a woman he had been seeing for months before my mother found out. He sent child support sometimes when he remembered, but mostly he just faded out of our lives like he had never really been there at all. My mother worked herself to the bone trying to make ends meet. She waitressed at a diner from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, then cleaned office buildings from 7 at night until midnight. I remember watching her get ready for work in the pre-dawn darkness, her face already exhausted before the day had even begun. She would look at herself in the bathroom mirror, with such defeat in her eyes that it made my chest hurt. Emma, my older sister, was 11 when our parents split. She had always been the pretty one, the one who could light up a room just by walking into it. She had our father's easy charm and our mother's striking features, and even as a child, she knew how to use both to her advantage. Teachers loved her. Other kids wanted to be her friend. And Mom looked at her with a mixture of pride and something else I could not name then but understand now. It was vicarious living, the hope that Emma would achieve all the things Mom had dreamed of before life had worn her down. I was different. I was quiet, bookish, the kind of kid who preferred reading in the corner to playing outside. I was not ugly exactly, but I was ordinary in a way that made people's eyes slide right past me. I learned early that the way to get attention in our house was not to be charming or beautiful. It was to be useful. The pattern started small. When I was 9, I began doing the dishes every night without being asked. Mom would come home from her day shift exhausted, and there I would be standing on a stool to reach the sink washing the lunch dishes she had left behind. The first time she noticed, she cried and hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. She told me I was her angel, her blessing, the one good thing in her life. Those words filled me with a warmth I had been craving, a sense of purpose and belonging. Emma never did chores. When Mom asked her to help, she would complain until Mom gave up and did the task herself or waited for me to do it. I remember one particular Saturday when I was 10 and Emma was 13. Mom had asked us both to clean the bathroom before she left for her evening shift. Emma had to date some boy from her class who was taking her to a movie. I wanted to go to my friend Sarah's birthday party. Mom stood in the hallway looking between us, clearly exhausted from her day shift. Emma launched into this elaborate explanation about how important this date was, how the boy might not ask her out again if she said no, how it was not fair to make her miss out on being a normal teenager. She even managed to make her eyes water like she was on the verge of tears. Mom caved, immediately told Emma to go have fun, to be home by 10. Then she turned to me with this apologetic look and asked if I could maybe skip the party and clean the bathroom. Just this once, she said, even though it was never just once. Sarah would understand, right? I could go to another party. Emma's date was time-sensitive. I called Sarah from the kitchen phone and told her I could not make it. I could hear the sounds of her party starting in the background, the laughter and music, and I felt something crack inside my chest. But I cleaned that bathroom until it sparkled, and when Mom came home at midnight exhausted and smelling like industrial cleaner, she hugged me and told me I was such a good girl, so much more mature than Emma. She said she did not know what she would do without me. I held on to those words like a lifeline. They became the thing I worked for, the approval I craved. Buying good, being useful, being selfless became my identity. It was the only value I could claim in a house where Emma sparkled and I faded into the background. Middle school was brutal for me. I was chubby, wore glasses, and had no idea how to dress or do my hair. I got decent grades, but nothing spectacular. I had a few friends, but no one really close. Meanwhile, Emma was the star of the high school drama club, had a boyfriend, and seemed to glide through life effortlessly. Mom talked about Emma constantly, about her performances in school, plays about the colleges she might get into, about all the amazing things she was going to do with her life. When people asked Mom about me, she would smile and say I was her responsible one, her helper. It should have felt good, but it never did. It felt like being furniture, necessary but not worth noticing. When I turned 14, something happened that changed the trajectory of my life. Mom sat me down at the kitchen table one evening and explained that we were behind on the mortgage. The bank had sent a warning letter. She showed it to me like I was an adult who could help solve this problem, not a 14-year-old kid who should have been worrying about homework and school dances. She told me she had been thinking, and she wondered if maybe I could get a work permit and find a part-time job. Nothing too demanding, just a few hours a week to help out. Emma had too much on her plate with school and drama club, Mom explained, but I was not involved in any activities. I had the time. And I was so responsible, so mature for my age. She knew I would do the right thing. I felt proud and terrified in equal measure. Proud that she trusted me with this responsibility, that she saw me as capable and mature. Terrified by the weight of it, by the understanding that our family's stability was somehow resting on my 14-year-old shoulders. But I said yes, because what else could I say? What kind of daughter would I be if I let us lose our house? I got a job at the local grocery store bagging groceries and collecting carts from the parking lot. The work permit limited me to 15 hours a week during the school year, but I worked every minute I was allowed. My first paycheck was for $87 after taxes. I remember staring at it, thinking about all the things I wanted. There was a book series I had been dying to read, a new backpack because mine was falling apart, maybe some clothes that actually fit properly. I came home with that check planning to ask Mom if I could keep $20 for myself. But before I could say anything, she was showing me another stack of bills, explaining how behind we were on everything, how the electricity was going to get shut off if we did not pay by Friday. She did not actually ask me to hand over my check. She did not have to. The expectation hung in the air between us, heavy and undeniable. I endorsed the check and gave it to her. She cried again, told me I was saving our family, that she loved me so much. I felt simultaneously proud and hollow, like I had done something noble but lost something important in the process. I kept $10 for myself, enough to buy one paperback book from the used bookstore downtown. That book became my escape, my reminder that there was a world beyond bills and responsibilities and the weight of other people's problems. Emma turned 17 that year and started working at a clothing store at the mall. She bought herself designer jeans, expensive makeup, concert tickets. When she came home with shopping bags, Mom would ask her what she bought, and Emma would model her new outfits like she was on a runway. Mom would laugh and tell her how beautiful she looked, how she deserved nice things. When I asked why Emma did not have to help with bills like I did, Mom got defensive. She pulled me aside one evening away from Emma and explained it in that serious tone she used when she wanted me to understand something important. She told me that Emma was different from me. Emma was sensitive, artistic, someone who needed beauty and joy in her life to thrive. I was stronger, she said. I was capable of handling hard things. Emma would crumble under the kind of pressure I could bear. Mom said it like it was a compliment, like my ability to endure made me special. But all I heard was that Emma's happiness mattered more than mine, that her needs were legitimate while mine were optional. I swallowed my resentment and kept working. Through my freshman year of high school, I balanced schoolwork with my job at the grocery store, giving most of my earnings to Mom. I was exhausted all the time, falling asleep in class, my grades slipping from B's to C's. My teachers expressed concern, suggested I was not living up to my potential, but I had no energy left to care about my potential. I was too busy ensuring we had electricity and food. Sophomore year, I asked Mom if maybe we could work out a budget where I kept a little more of my paycheck. I had been hoping to join the art club at school. There was a small fee for supplies, and I would need money for materials. I loved drawing, found peace in it, and my art teacher had told me I had real talent. For the first time, I had found something that was mine, something that made me more than just the responsible one. Mom listened to my request, and for a moment I thought she might say yes. Then her face crumpled and she started crying. She told me she had been trying so hard to keep us afloat that she worked 2 jobs and still could not make ends meet. She said she had been considering taking on a third job cleaning houses on the weekends, but her body was already breaking down from the work she was doing. She asked me if I really wanted her to work herself to death. She asked me if art club was more important than keeping a roof over our heads. I felt like the worst person in the world. How could I be so selfish? How could I ask for something frivolous when Mom was literally working herself to death for us? I told her to forget I had asked, that I did not need art club, that I wanted to help. She hugged me and told me she knew I would understand, that I was her good girl. I never joined the art club. I stopped drawing altogether because every time I picked up a pencil, I felt guilty for wanting something for myself. Junior year, things got worse. Mom developed problems with her back from all the cleaning work. Some days she could barely move, could barely get out of bed. She had to cut back her hours at the cleaning job, which meant less income. The mortgage fell behind again. The car needed expensive repairs. Emma needed money for senior photos for prom, for college application fees. I increased my hours at the grocery store, working the maximum allowed for someone under 18. I worked every weekend, every evening after school. My manager liked me because I was reliable, never complained, always showed up. He started giving me more hours than I was technically allowed to work, paying me cash under the table for anything over my limit. I did not question it because we needed the money. I was 16 years old and carrying the financial weight of a family of 3. I had no social life, no hobbies, no time for anything but school and work. I watched my classmates worry about normal teenager things like dances and dating and what to wear, and I felt ancient, like I was 100 years old trapped in a teenager's body. Emma graduated high school and announced she was taking a gap year before college. She said she needed time to find herself, to figure out what she wanted to do with her life. What she actually did was work part-time at a coffee shop and spend most of her time with her boyfriend, a guy named Jake who played in a band and had big dreams but no actual job. Emma moved her boyfriend into our house without asking Mom or me, just came home one day and announced he would be staying with us for a while. Jake ate our food, used our utilities, and contributed nothing. When I suggested that maybe he should help out financially if he was living with us, Emma accused me of being unwelcoming and jealous that she had found someone who loved her. Mom defended Emma, said it was temporary, that I needed to be more understanding. Jake lived with us for 8 months. I graduated high school with a 3.1 GPA, mediocre at best. I had been in the top 20% of my class freshman year, but the last 3 years of constant work had destroyed my academic performance. I had no extracurriculars, no sports, no leadership positions. My college applications were pathetic and I knew it. I applied to the local community college because it was all I could afford anyway. The guidance counselor called me in during the spring of my senior year. She had seen my old test scores, my freshman grades, and she wanted to know what had happened. She asked me directly if everything was okay at home, if there was something she should know about. I almost told her the truth. I almost explained about the jobs, the bills, the way my entire life had become about keeping my family afloat. But then I imagined what would happen if I did. Social services getting involved, Mom being investigated, everyone thinking we were a trashy family that could not take care of ourselves. I told the counselor everything was fine, that I just was not good at school. She did not believe me. I could see it in her eyes. But she did not push, and I was grateful for that. I started at community college in the fall, commuting from home. I declared a major in accounting because it was practical, stable, the kind of career that could actually make money. I had no passion for it, but passion seemed like a luxury I could not afford. My plan was to get my associate degree, then hopefully transfer to a 4-year school, though I had no idea how I would pay for that. The day I started college, I felt this flutter of hope. Maybe things would change. Maybe once I got a better job, once I started making real money, I could start building a life for myself. I could move out eventually, have my own space, make my own decisions. The thought was intoxicating. Emma was 21 by then and still living at home. Jake had finally moved out after Mom gave him an ultimatum, but Emma had cycled through 2 more boyfriends since then. She had enrolled in community college the year after me, but dropped out after 1 semester, saying it was not the right fit for her. She worked at a series of part-time jobs, never staying anywhere longer than 3 or 4 months. There was always a reason. A manager who did not respect her coworkers, who were mean hours that did not work with her schedule. When she was not working, she slept until noon and spent her evenings out with friends. She contributed nothing to the household. Mom never asked her to. When I brought it up, Mom said Emma was going through a rough time, that she was figuring herself out, that I needed to be more supportive of my sister. I was 18 years old, working 30 hours a week while taking a full course load and paying for everything in our house except Emma's car insurance, which Mom covered. I was supporting a grown woman who slept all day and a mother who defended her. The unfairness of it was choking me, but I did not know how to break the pattern. It was all I had ever known. My first year of community college was a blur of exhaustion. I took classes in the morning, worked the afternoon and evening shifts at the grocery store, and studied late into the night. I survived on 4 or 5 hours of sleep and way too much coffee. My body started breaking down. I developed stress-related stomach problems that had me constantly nauseous. I lost weight because I was too anxious to eat properly. I started having panic attacks, though I did not know that was what they were at the time. I just thought I was weak, that I was not handling my life as well as I should. During my second year, something happened that should have been a wake-up call. I passed out at work. Just collapsed between the aisles, blood sugar crashed from not eating enough and not sleeping enough. My manager called an ambulance, and I woke up in the emergency room with an IV in my arm and a doctor telling me I was severely anemic and suffering from exhaustion. The doctor asked me point blank if I was getting enough to eat, if my home situation was safe, if someone was hurting me. I lied and said everything was fine, that I had just been studying too hard for finals. The doctor did not look convinced, but she could not keep me there against my will. She gave me a prescription for iron supplements and told me I needed to take better care of myself. She said if I kept going at this pace, I was going to do permanent damage to my body. The hospital visit cost $300 after insurance. Mom was furious, said we could not afford unexpected medical bills, asked me why I'd let myself get so run down. There was no concern for my health, just anger about the money. Emma was not even home when I got back from the hospital. She was out at a concert with her friends. I lay in my childhood bed that night, staring at the glow in the dark stars on my ceiling that I had put up when I was 10, and I felt something break inside me. Not cleanly, but a hairline fracture, the kind that you do not notice at first, but that spreads and weakens the whole structure over time. I kept going because I did not know what else to do. I finished my associate degree and landed a job at a small accounting firm. The salary was $32,000 a year, which felt like a fortune after years of minimum wage work. I was 22 years old, and for the first time I felt like maybe I could breathe. My first real paycheck came on a Friday. After taxes, I took home about $1,900 for the month. I sat in my car in the parking lot after work and stared at that direct deposit notification on my phone. This was it. This was my chance to start saving, to start planning for my own place, my own life. I drove home with plans forming in my head. I would give Mom $500 this month, enough to help, but not everything. I would put $1,000 into savings. The rest would cover my car insurance, my phone bill, my student loans. It was doable. It was the beginning of something new. Mom was waiting for me at the kitchen table. She had a laptop open in front of her, something she had borrowed from our neighbor because ours had broken months ago and we could not afford to replace it. She turned the screen toward me, and I saw a spreadsheet of our household finances. Every bill was listed color-coded by urgency. Red meant past due. Yellow meant due soon. Green meant paid. There was not much green on that screen. She explained that she had been doing the math, and with her reduced hours because of her back, we were short about $900 a month. She had been putting off bills, making minimum payments where possible, but we were drowning. The mortgage was 3 months behind. If we did not catch up soon, we would lose the house. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and asked if I could help. Just until she could get her hours back up, just until Emma found a better job, just temporarily. I looked at that spreadsheet, at all that red, and I felt my plans dissolve. How could I save money for an apartment when my mother was about to lose her house? How could I think about my own future when my family needed me right now? What kind of person would that make me? I agreed to pay the mortgage. $850 a month. More than half my take-home pay. Mom cried and hugged me, told me I was saving us, that she did not know what she would have done without me. She said this was temporary, just a few months until things stabilized. But things never stabilized. They never do when the problem is not bad luck or a temporary setback, but a fundamental dysfunction in how people manage their lives and their money. Emma, who was 25 by then, had gotten a job as a receptionist at a hair salon. She made about $1,200 a month and still lived at home rent-free. She spent her money on clothes, on nights out with friends, on concert tickets and weekend trips. She had a new boyfriend every few months, and each one was the love of her life, until he was not. She talked constantly about wanting to move out to get her own place, but she never saved any money toward that goal. When I suggested to Mom that maybe Emma should contribute to household expenses now that I was paying the mortgage, Mom got angry with me. She accused me of being jealous of Emma, of always having resented her. She said Emma was paying for her own car, her own phone, her own expenses. She said I had a better paying job, so it made sense that I would contribute more. She said siblings were supposed to help each other, not keep score. I wanted to scream that I had been helping for the last 8 years while Emma had been helping herself. I wanted to point out that Emma's car payment was for a 3-year-old sedan she did not need, while I drove a 15-year-old rust bucket that I prayed would start every morning. I wanted to list every single sacrifice I had made while Emma had sacrificed nothing. But I did not, because the pattern was too ingrained, because I did not know how to be anything other than the one who gave. The years bled together. 23, 24, 25. I paid the mortgage every month without fail. I also paid for groceries when Mom said she was short, which was most weeks. I paid for the plumber when the kitchen sink backed up for the new water heater, when the old one died for the car repairs, when Mom's transmission failed. There was always something, always another crisis, always another expense that only I could cover. I got a small raise at work and my take-home pay went up to about $2,200 a month. The extra $300 should have gone to my savings, but it just meant I could cover more of the household expenses. My savings account never grew beyond a few $100s. There was always something that needed to be paid. I was 26 years old and still living in my childhood bedroom, sleeping in a twin bed, surrounded by posters I had hung when I was 14. I had no retirement savings, no emergency fund, no safety net of any kind. If I lost my job, I would have nothing. The realization terrified me, but not enough to change anything because I did not know how. My coworkers talked about their lives, their plans. One was saving for a down payment on a house. Another was planning a trip to Europe. A third was taking graduate classes at night to get her CPA. I listened to them talk about their futures and felt like I was watching life happen to other people while I stood still, trapped in amber, unable to move forward. I tried dating a few times. There was Mark, who I met at the grocery store, where I still picked up occasional shifts on weekends for extra money. He was sweet, seemed genuinely interested, and we went out 3 times before he invited me back to his apartment. It was a studio, small but clean, decorated with posters of bands I did not recognize and furniture that did not match but somehow worked together. It was his space, entirely his, and I felt such a sharp stab of jealousy I could barely breathe. When he asked me about my living situation, I tried to make it sound less pathetic than it was. I explained I was helping my family out temporarily while I saved up. He nodded like he understood, but I could see the questions in his eyes. Why was a 26-year-old woman still living at home? What was wrong with me? We went out twice more and then he stopped calling. I told myself it was for the best. How could I have a relationship when I had nothing to offer? When every dollar I made was already spoken for? When I could not even imagine a future where I had my own place, my own life? There was David, who I met through work. He was an auditor who came in quarterly, and we struck up a friendship that slowly turned into something more. He asked me out and I said yes, desperate for some kind of connection, some reminder that I was more than just a walking ATM for my family. We dated for 4 months, and it was nice. He was stable, kind, had a good job and his own condo. He represented everything I wanted but could not have. The end came when he started talking about me meeting his parents, about where our relationship was going. He asked me when I planned to move out of my mother's house. He said it gently, not judging, just curious. I tried to explain the situation, but as the words came out of my mouth, I heard how it sounded. I was a grown woman with a decent job, still living at home, still supporting her mother and sister, with no plan to change any of it. David said he cared about me, but he was looking for a partner, someone who was ready to build a life together. He said it seemed like my life was not my own, that I was still enmeshed with my family in an unhealthy way. He suggested I might benefit from therapy. Then he wished me well and walked away. I cried for days after that breakup, not because I loved David deeply, but because he had held up a mirror and forced me to see what I had become. A 26-year-old woman with no life of her own, no boundaries, no future. I was living in a holding pattern, circling endlessly, but never landing, never moving forward. That was when I started thinking seriously about therapy. I had always dismissed it as something for people with real problems, but maybe I had real problems too. Maybe the constant anxiety, the panic attacks I still had, regularly the feeling of being trapped and helpless. Maybe those were signs that something was deeply wrong. I found a therapist who offered sliding scale fees because, of course, I could not afford full price sessions. Doctor. Sarah Chen was in her 40s, kind but direct, and in our first session, she asked me to talk about my family. I spent 50 minutes unloading years of resentment and guilt and confusion. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and asked me a simple question that changed everything. She asked me what I thought would happen if I stopped paying for everything. I started to answer with all the catastrophes I had been conditioned to fear. Mom would lose the house. Emma would have to finally grow up and take responsibility. They would be angry with me. They would hate me. They would tell me I had abandoned them. Doctor. Chen listened patiently, and then she asked me another question. She asked me why those outcomes were my responsibility to prevent. I did not have an answer. I sat there in her office, $30 of my own money ticking away, and I could not explain why it was my job to keep everyone else's life from falling apart. The silence stretched between us, heavy and revealing. Doctor. Chen explained something to me that day about codependency, about enabling, about how by constantly rescuing people from the consequences of their choices, I was preventing them from ever having to change. She said I had been trained from childhood to sacrifice myself for others, to believe that my value was only in what I could provide. She said that was not love. That was exploitation. I left that first therapy session shaken. Part of me wanted to never go back, to keep living in denial, where at least I could pretend I was being noble instead of being used. But another part of me, a small, stubborn part that had been slowly growing since my hospital stay, knew she was right. I booked another appointment for the following week. Over the next months, therapy became my lifeline. Doctor. Chen helped me understand the family dynamics I had grown up with, helped me see how my mother's treatment of me versus Emma was not just unfair but actively harmful. She helped me recognize my panic attacks for what they were, symptoms of living under constant stress and pressure. She taught me about boundaries, about the difference between helping and enabling, about how it was possible to love someone and still refuse to be destroyed by them. But understanding something intellectually and being able to actually change your behavior are two entirely different things. I tried to set boundaries. I really did. I would psych myself up, practice what I would say to Mom, imagine myself calmly but firmly explaining that things had to change. Then I would get home and see her tired face, hear her sigh as she looked at the bills, and every word I had planned would evaporate. I tried to have the conversation about Emma contributing financially at least 6 times over those months. Each time it went badly. Mom would get defensive, tell me I was attacking Emma, that I had always been jealous of her. She would weaponize my guilt, remind me of everything she had sacrificed for us, ask me if I really wanted to see her end up homeless. She was a master at emotional manipulation, and I was still too weak to resist it. Doctor. Chen suggested I start with smaller boundaries. Instead of trying to completely change the financial arrangement all at once, maybe I could start by saying no to individual requests. When Mom asked me to pay for something outside our usual arrangement, I could practice refusing. The first time I tried it, Mom asked me to pay for Emma's car insurance for the month because Emma was short on money. It was $250, not a huge amount, but not nothing either. I took a deep breath and told Mom that I could not help this time, that Emma needed to figure it out herself. She was 27 years old with a job. This was her responsibility. Mom stared at me like I had slapped her. Then she started crying, asking me what had happened to me, why I had become so cold and selfish. She said therapy was putting ideas in my head, making me turn against my own family. She said Emma would probably lose her car insurance and then lose her job because she could not drive to work, and it would be my fault. The guilt was crushing, but I held firm. For the first time in my life, I held firm. Emma kept her car and kept her job. It turned out she had money, she just had not wanted to spend it on something as boring as car insurance when she could spend it on fun things instead. When she realized I was not going to cave, she paid it herself. Nothing catastrophic happened. The world did not end. That small victory gave me confidence to try again. The next month, Mom asked me to pay for repairs on the house, some work on the gutters that needed to be done. I told her no, that I could not take on any more expenses. She got angry, accused me of not caring about the house we lived in, but I did not back down. She ended up putting it on a credit card, something she could have done all along but had not needed to because I was always there to solve her problems. Each time I said no, it got slightly easier, but it never stopped feeling terrible. The guilt was overwhelming, a constant weight in my chest. I would lie awake at night, second-guessing myself, wondering if I was being selfish, if I was destroying my family. Doctor. Chen kept reminding me that guilt is not always a reliable indicator of wrongdoing, that I had been conditioned to feel guilty for having boundaries, that the guilt would lessen over time as I got used to valuing myself. I was 27 years old and slowly, painfully starting to imagine a life that was my own. I opened a separate savings account at a different bank, one that Mom did not know about. I started putting $100 into it every month, money I told myself was for an emergency, but was really for escape. Watching that balance grow gave me a sense of hope I had not felt in years. Then one evening in March, everything changed. I came home from work to find Emma sitting at the kitchen table with Mom, both of them looking serious. My first thought was that something was medically wrong, that Mom was sick, that this was the crisis I had been dreading my whole life. But it was not that. Emma announced she was pregnant. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. She was 28, single, the latest boyfriend having broken up with her 2 weeks earlier when she told him about the pregnancy. She had no savings, no plan, no idea how she was going to handle this. And she needed help. Mom immediately started making plans, talking about how Emma would move back into her old room, how we would convert the spare bedroom into a nursery, how we would all work together to help raise this baby. She talked about Emma like she was a teenager instead of a grown woman who had spent the last decade making irresponsible choices with no consequences. I stood there listening to them plan out how my life was about to change to accommodate Emma's crisis, and something finally snapped inside me. All the therapy, all the small boundaries I had been setting, all the work I had been doing to value myself, it crystallized into a moment of absolute clarity. I told them no. The word came out quiet but firm. Mom and Emma both turned to look at me like I had started speaking a foreign language. I said it again, louder this time. No, I would not be helping financially with this baby. No, I would not be rearranging my life to take care of Emma's choices. No, I was done sacrificing myself for people who had never once sacrificed anything for me. The explosion was immediate. Mom started yelling, asking me how I could be so heartless, so cruel. This was family, she screamed. This was what families did for each other. Emma started crying, saying I had always hated her, that I was jealous and bitter and cold. She said I wanted her to fail, wanted her to suffer. I let them yell. I let them cry. And then I told them something I had been planning for weeks, but had not had the courage to say until that moment. I told them I was moving out. I had been saving money and I was going to get my own apartment. I would continue to pay the mortgage for 3 more months to give them time to make other arrangements, but after that they were on their own. They were adults. It was time they started acting like it. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom looked at me like I was a stranger. Emma's tears had stopped, replaced by something harder, angrier. Mom asked me if I was really going to abandon my pregnant sister, if I had really become the kind of person who would turn her back on family. She said my father had abandoned us, and now I was doing the same thing. She said I was just like him, selfish and cold. The comparison to my father should have destroyed me. It was designed to, that is why she said it. But instead I felt a strange sense of calm. I told her that taking care of myself was not abandonment, that choosing to have a life was not selfish, that I had been carrying this family since I was 14 years old and I was done. I walked upstairs to my childhood bedroom and called Dr. Chen, even though it was after hours. She answered and I told her what had just happened. She told me she was proud of me, that this was the bravest thing I could do, that the hard part was just beginning, but I was strong enough to handle it. We talked for over an hour, and when I hung up, I felt centered in a way I never had before. The next morning, I called in sick to work and went apartment hunting. I had $2,300 in my secret savings account and a determination I had never felt before. I saw 3 apartments, and the third one was perfect. A studio in an older building across town, $550 a month. It was tiny, barely 200 square feet, but it had big windows and hardwood floors, and it was mine. I filled out the application right there, paid the deposit and first month's rent, and got my keys. I would move in 2 weeks. I sat in that empty studio apartment on the floor with my back against the wall and I cried. But they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of freedom, of finally choosing myself. The 2 weeks before I moved out were hell. Mom alternated between giving me the silent treatment and having emotional breakdowns. She would corner me in the kitchen or the hallway, crying, asking me how I could do this to her. She said she had sacrificed everything for me, worked herself to the bone to keep a roof over my head, and this was how I repaid her. She said I was breaking her heart, that I was destroying our family. Emma was not speaking to me at all. She would glare at me when we crossed paths in the house, making sure I knew how much she despised me. She posted things on social media about fake family members, about people who abandoned you when you needed them most. I knew they were about me, and some of our mutual relatives started calling, asking me what was going on, telling me I should reconsider, that family was forever. But I held firm. I had Dr. Chen, who I was seeing twice a week during this transition. I had Rachel from work, who had become a good friend, and who reminded me constantly that what I was doing was healthy and necessary. And I had that studio apartment waiting for me, a physical representation of the life I was claiming for myself. Moving day came on a Saturday in April. I had taken the day off work, rented a small U-Haul van, and enlisted Rachel and her husband to help me move. I did not have much, just my clothes, my books, my laptop, and a few personal items. Everything else belonged to the house, to the family, to the life I was leaving behind. Mom stayed in her room the entire time I was packing and loading the van. She did not say goodbye, did not acknowledge I was leaving. Emma sat on the couch watching TV, turning up the volume every time I walked past with a box. It should have hurt more than it did, but I was too focused on the future to mourn the past in that moment. I left my house key on the kitchen counter with a note. The note contained a budget I had worked out for them, showing that between Mom's salary and Emma's salary, they could afford the mortgage and bills if they actually managed their money responsibly. I left the contact information for a financial counselor who offered free services. I told them I loved them and hoped they would eventually understand why I had to do this. I did not apologize because I had nothing to apologize for. Rachel drove the van while I followed in my car, and we unloaded everything into my new apartment in less than an hour. After they left, I stood in the middle of my empty studio and felt a mixture of terror and exhilaration. This was it. This was my life now, for better or worse. I was alone, truly alone, for the first time ever. The first night was hard. I slept on an air mattress I had bought at Target, surrounded by boxes, and I cried myself to sleep. But when I woke up the next morning to sunlight streaming through my windows, to silence that was mine instead of filled with other people's demands, I felt something shift inside me. This was what freedom felt like. The weeks that followed were a process of learning how to live for myself. I had to buy furniture piece by piece because I could not afford to furnish the whole apartment at once. I got a bed frame from Craigslist, a small couch from a thrift store, a tiny kitchen table from IKEA. Each piece was chosen by me, for me, based on what I liked and what I could afford. It was the first time I had ever made choices without having to consider everyone else first. I had to learn how to budget for myself instead of for a household of 3. It turned out that when I was only paying for my own expenses, my salary went a lot further. I could buy groceries without Mom eating half of them. I could keep my apartment as clean or as messy as I wanted. I could come home from work and do nothing if that was what I needed, without guilt or pressure or someone demanding my attention. But the guilt did not disappear overnight. I would lie awake at night wondering if Mom had paid the mortgage, if Emma was okay, if they were managing. I would feel phantom pulls to call them, to check on them, to offer to help. Dr. Chen called this the rubber band effect, the way we snap back toward our old patterns even after we have broken free. She told me it was normal, that it would lessen over time, that I needed to sit with the discomfort instead of giving into it. I blocked Mom's number after 2 weeks because the voicemails she left were destroying my peace. They ranged from sobbing pleas for me to come home to angry rants about how selfish I was. One particularly cruel message said she wished she had never had me, that I had ruined her life just by being born. That one broke something in me, but it also hardened my resolve. Anyone who could say that to their child did not deserve access to them. I blocked Emma's number too after a series of text messages that were so vicious I could not read them without having a panic attack. She called me every name imaginable, said I was going to hell, said I had abandoned her when she needed me most. The cruelty was breathtaking, but it also clarified something for me. These were not the reactions of people who loved me and wanted what was best for me. These were the reactions of people who had lost their source of money and labor and were angry about it. A month after I moved out, I got a call from Aunt Karen, my mother's sister. I almost did not answer because I assumed she was calling to berate me like some of the other relatives had. But something made me pick up, and I am glad I did, because Aunt Karen surprised me. She told me she had heard Mom's version of events, the version where I was a heartless monster who had abandoned my family in their time of need. But Aunt Karen said she wanted to hear my side before passing judgment, so I told her everything, all of it, holding nothing back. 20 years of being used, of being the responsible one, of sacrificing everything while Emma sacrificed nothing. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then Aunt Karen said something that made me cry. She said she had always known something was not right in our family dynamic, that she had watched me bear the weight of adult responsibilities from too young an age. She said she was ashamed that she had not intervened, that she had not realized how bad it had gotten. She told me she was proud of me for finally choosing myself, that it took real courage to break a generational pattern of dysfunction. Aunt Karen became my ally, my connection to the family that did not come with demands or guilt. She told me that Mom and Emma were managing, that they had not lost the house, that Emma was working more hours, and Mom had gotten her hours at the cleaning company back up. She said they complained constantly about me, painted me as the villain in their story, but they were surviving just fine without my money. That knowledge was both a relief and a revelation. I had been so convinced that without me they would fall apart, that I was the only thing holding our family together. But they were fine. They had always been capable of taking care of themselves. They just had not needed to, as long as I was there to do it for them. I started to build a life. I took a pottery class on Wednesday evenings, something I had always wanted to try. The first time I sat at the wheel with my hands in wet clay, shaping something beautiful out of nothing, I felt more centered than I had in years. I was terrible at it, my bowls lopsided and my vases collapsing more often than not, but it was mine. It was something I did for joy, not obligation, and that made all the difference. I went out with coworkers and actually enjoyed myself. I said yes to happy hours and weekend brunches and concerts in the park. I started making friends, real friends, who knew me as I was now, not as I had been when I was drowning. They liked me for me, not for what I could do for them, and that was revolutionary. I adopted a cat from the local shelter, a gray tabby with green eyes who had been there for 6 months because she was shy and people wanted kittens. I named her Luna, and she became my companion. She would sit on my lap while I watched TV, sleep, curled against my side at night, and purr so loudly it sounded like a motorboat. Taking care of her taught me something important. It taught me the difference between caring for someone who reciprocated that care and giving endlessly to people who only took. 8 months after I moved out, I met Daniel. He worked as an engineer in the office building next to mine, and we kept running into each other at the coffee shop downstairs. He started timing his coffee runs to coincide with mine, and we would chat while we waited in line. He was funny and kind and genuinely interested in getting to know me, not what I could do for him. When he asked me out, I said yes with a mixture of hope and terror. I had not dated anyone since my move, too focused on building my new life to make room for a relationship. But there was something about Daniel that made me want to try. On our first date, I was honest with him about my family situation, expecting him to run. I explained that I was estranged from my mother and sister, that the relationship had been toxic, that I was working hard to heal from years of dysfunction. Daniel listened without judgment, and then he said something that meant everything to me. He said that the fact that I had recognized an unhealthy pattern and been brave enough to break it showed incredible strength. He said that made me someone worth knowing. We talked for hours that night, and when he walked me to my car, he asked if he could see me again. Dating Daniel was different from any relationship I had ever had. He never demanded more than I could give. He never made me feel guilty for having boundaries or needs. When I had bad days, when the guilt about my family would resurface and threaten to pull me under, he would listen and validate my feelings without trying to fix me. He would remind me gently that I was not responsible for other people's choices or happiness, that I had every right to protect myself. He introduced me to his family, and I was terrified. I expected them to judge me for being estranged from my own family, to see me as damaged or difficult. But his parents were warm and welcoming, and his sister became one of my closest friends. Watching his family interact, seeing how they supported each other without exploitation or guilt trips, showed me what healthy family dynamics could look like. It was both beautiful and painful, a reminder of what I had never had, but also proof that it was possible. A year after I moved out, Emma had her baby. Aunt Karen sent me a photo of a tiny red-faced infant wrapped in a pink blanket. Emma had named her Lily. I stared at that photo for a long time, feeling a complicated tangle of emotions I could not name. Part of me wanted to reach out to meet my niece, to try to build some kind of relationship. But I knew that opening that door meant risking everything I had worked so hard to build. Doctor. Chen and I talked about it extensively in therapy. She reminded me that I could love Emma and her baby from a distance, that wanting to protect myself did not make me a bad person or a bad aunt. She said that maybe someday, when I was stronger and more secure in my boundaries, I could revisit the possibility of contact. but it had to be on my terms and my time, and only if it was healthy for me. I sent a card with a gift card inside through Aunt Karen with a note that simply said congratulations and best wishes. I did not include my phone number or address. It was a small gesture, an acknowledgement of this new life, without opening myself up to being used again. Aunt Karen told me Emma barely acknowledged it, just pocketed the gift card without comment. That should have hurt, but mostly it just confirmed what I already knew. Emma had not changed. She was still the same person who took without gratitude, who felt entitled to whatever she wanted without having to give anything in return. Life kept moving forward. Daniel and I moved in together after dating for 18 months. We found a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment with big windows and a balcony where we could sit on summer evenings. I had never lived with a partner before, and I was terrified I would not know how to share space with someone else. But Daniel was patient and considerate, and we figured it out together. Living with him taught me that relationships could be partnerships, that two people could support each other without one person being drained dry. I got promoted at work, a recognition of the focus and energy I could now put into my career instead of constantly worrying about my family's problems. My manager told me I had really come into my own over the past year, that I seemed more confident and engaged. I did not tell her it was because I finally had space to be myself, to develop skills and pursue opportunities instead of just surviving. I made new friends through the pottery class and through Daniel's social circle. I had a group of women I met for brunch once a month, friends who knew my whole story and supported my journey. I had coworkers who I genuinely liked spending time with. For the first time in my life, I had a social circle that was mine, not inherited from family or circumstance, but chosen deliberately. But the past has a way of catching up with you no matter how far you run. Which brings me back to that text message, the one that started this whole story. The message from Emma telling me that Mom was in the hospital with a stroke, blaming me for causing it with the stress of my decision to stop sending money. I stared at the text message on my phone, my hands trembling so violently that I nearly dropped it. The words blurred through my tears, but I had already memorized every single one. My sister had just informed me that our mother was in the hospital after a severe stroke, and in the same breath she blamed me for causing it. According to her, my decision to stop sending money 3 months ago had stressed Mom out so much that it triggered this medical emergency. The guilt crashed over me like a tidal wave, threatening to pull me back into the suffocating darkness I had only just escaped. So here's my question for you. Have you ever had to make the impossible choice between loyalty to someone you love and loyalty to yourself? How did you find the courage to choose yourself? Or are you still trying to find that courage? Share your story in the comments below. You might be surprised by how many people understand, how many people have walked this same painful path. If this story resonated with you, if it gave you hope or made you feel less alone, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding yourself and building the life you deserve. And most importantly, be kind to yourself today. You are doing better than you think you are.